What do Arwen, Barra, Corrie, Dudley, Eunice, and Franklin have in common? These are the names of the latest storms to hit the UK, bringing with them wind, rain, and harm. In the days of Jesus, storms didn't have names, but they certainly had power. There is physical power in a storm to cause damage and destruction, but also there is power to cause fear. On the Sea of Galilee, we meet some very fearful disciples. They were not strangers to the sea, and unlikely to be strangers to storms. The Sea of Galilee's location makes it vulnerable to sudden and violent storms, as the wind comes over the eastern mountains and drops suddenly onto the sea. But here, the disciples are in a boat, nearly swamped with water, and they are afraid, very afraid. However, someone in the boat is fearlessly sleeping, unaware and unfazed by the storm surrounding him. That is until the disciples wake him and cry out, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" I wonder, what would you have cried out to Jesus in that moment? Perhaps, "Teacher, how can you sleep through this?" Or, "Teacher, can't you stop this storm?" Or quite simply, "Teacher, help!" The question the disciples ask is not about the wind and the waves. It isn't about Jesus' power to do anything about it. They don't even ask him to save them. It seems their greatest fear is not drowning, but actually whether Jesus would care if they did. They wanted to know if Jesus cared. And of course he cared. These were his disciples, people he loved dearly. Jesus' whole life and ministry was about others and being with them in their storms. Jesus came to earth as an expression of God's love for humanity. He came to be with his children through the physical, emotional, and spiritual storms they would face. We read in Isaiah 43 verse 2, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you." Jesus is with the disciples when they are passing through the stormy waters of Galilee. He is present in that boat. He may be asleep, but that doesn't stop his love, care, and protection from saving the day. On being woken up by the fearful disciples, Jesus got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. When I wake up, I find it hard enough to just roll out of bed. Yet when Jesus wakes up, he speaks and the storm ends. The sea becomes completely calm. The storm is over. In the stillness, Jesus asks, "Why are you so afraid?" If the disciples had sarcastic tendencies, I'm sure they could give a very witty answer. Just like the disciples, we can think of many reasons why at times we are so afraid. Storms, war, illness, bereavement, crime, climate change, isolation, rising prices, unemployment, family concerns. It's easy to think of reasons to be afraid, especially when you're in the middle of the sea in a boat which is being overwhelmed with water and you've not got so much as a life jacket. A level of fear is part of what it is to walk on this broken earth. At times, fear keeps us safe. At times, it prevents us from living the life God created us to live. In those moments of panic and anxiety, we can let lies overwhelm us and believe we are doomed, when in fact, God has us securely in the palm of his hand. During World War II, a military governor met with General George Patton in Sicily. When he praised Patton for his courage and bravery, the general replied, "Sir, I am not a brave man. The truth is, I am a coward. I have never been within the sound of gunshot or in sight of battle in my whole life that I wasn't so scared that I had sweat in the palm of my hands." Years later, when Patton's autobiography was published, it contained this significant statement by the general: "I learned very early in my life never to let my fears take control of me." As Jesus sat with the disciples on the calm sea, he would not naively think that they could suddenly be fearless, but instead, with him in their lives, they could fear less. Fear should not control the disciples' lives, and it should not control ours. Jesus wants us to be free from the chains of fear, whatever storm we are in. Do you still have no faith? Jesus asks. We often read this in a tone of condemnation, but perhaps these words of challenge are simply asking us, does your faith make any difference to your fear? The disciples had been on a journey with Jesus. In and through him, they had seen miraculous healing, powerful teaching, and radical love. They knew that something was going on with this man. They knew he was something very special. They knew this should make a difference. But still, their anxious hearts were beating louder than their faith-filled hearts. There is a story told of a man called Oscar who was apprehensive about his first aeroplane ride. His friends, eager to hear how it went, asked if he enjoyed the flight. "Well," commented Oscar, "it wasn't as bad as I thought it might be, but I'll tell you this, I never did put all my weight down." Faith in Christ is about putting all our weight down. It is about depending on God wholeheartedly, even when the winds blow and the storms rage. But to be free from our fears and trust in Jesus, we have to decide for ourselves who he is. The story of Jesus calming the storm concludes with the disciples asking each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." Through each encounter with Jesus, they were discovering something more about who he was. They may have met other good teachers. They could have known others who expressed an element of love like Jesus. There were others who could draw a crowd. But the disciples knew no one else who could get the wind and the waves to obey them. How about you? Who do you know who can say quiet, be still, to a storm and bring about total calm? Only Jesus. On the stormy Sea of Galilee, the physical storm that surrounded the disciples was calmed by the voice of Jesus. We are so aware that not every storm is stilled in our lives. We still face sickness. We still face loss. We still face conflict. We still face loneliness. We still face storms in our lives. In these times, God says to us, quiet, be still and know that I am God. We can know peace in the storm. This is not peace in the way the world defines it, but the peace that passes all understanding, because we are not alone in the storm. Sometimes the Lord calms the storm. Sometimes he lets the storm rage and calms his child. The world gives us many reasons to be fearful, but we have a greater reason not to. In Isaiah 41 verse 10, we hear God say, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God." The God who created the heavens and the earth, The one with all power and authority, the one who sent his Son to die for us, is with us. The God who has defeated death and darkness walks with us in the storm and says, "Quiet, be still." During my recent trip to London, I went to see the musical Come From Away, which tells the story of what happened to the small town of Gander in Newfoundland, Canada, during the events of September the 11th, when 38 planes had to unexpectedly land. The small community rallied together throughout the struggle to accommodate nearly 7,000 passengers following the tragedy. There is one especially moving scene when we see a frightened man from Africa on a bus with his wife in rural Newfoundland, being taken to who knows where from a plane that lands far from its destination. They come to a camp full of people in military uniform, Salvation Army uniforms in fact. The bus driver stops and motions for the passengers to get off the bus. The man doesn't move. He does not understand the bus driver's language. He does not trust him. And then the bus driver points to the Bible that the man's wife is clutching. She hands it to him nervously. He flips to Philippians and points at chapter 4, verse 6. Be anxious for nothing. This man is a Christian. They are friends. They are safe. In the midst of the storm, culture and language are no barrier to recognizing the peace of God. Together, these strangers, united in both the storm and the peace, can be anxious for nothing. What are you fearful of today? What storms are threatening to swamp your boat? What battles do you keep fighting day after day? As we cry out to God, he says, "Quiet, be still." Sometimes to the storm around us, sometimes to the storm within us. Perhaps today you need to take on the words of Exodus 14, verse 14. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. God bless you.